Pendulum, drum and bass legends. Nobody has inspired me more than these lads have. When I first started producing, I was like, I just want to be like Pendulum. So I take every opportunity to learn from Pendulum when I can, and a few years ago they released the stems to Granite as part of some remix competition. I didn't enter the remix competition, but I did download the stems ASAP to just learn from it as much as possible. And now since Pendulum's released another song, Napalm, I decided to dig up those stems, try to recreate something Pendulum aesthetic, see what I could learn, and then create a tutorial all about it. So that's what I did. And if you haven't heard of Granite, I don't know where you've been sleeping under a rock or something, here's how it goes. Classic, let's not play too much so we get copyright striked. I then broke down the stems and pretty much tried to create something of my own accord in that similar-ish style. And so just like breaking down the different elements from the stems and implementing them in my own shenanigans. So yeah, here's 5 things that I learned from the stems of Pendulum's Granite. So, drums. Now the kick drum weirdly sits high in the mix. So I actually pitched up my kick drum, because when comparing to the stems, I was like, this is just too like deep and low for like a Pendulum kick. So, like I was saying, the kick is very high in the mix. So I worked on that, pitched up my kick 1 semitone, and then created a fade so it was nice and snappy. Also, Pendulum's kicks and snare, not super transient heavy. If you don't know what I mean by transient, it's that initial burst of sound right at the start of like a percussive element or whatever. It's that kind of click. It's the very start. So this is like typically the fundamental of the kick, and this is like the transient where it gets its little, it's typically where percussion or like very sharp, snappy sounds get their sharp snap from. So I actually rounded mine off a bit. You can see the fade in here. So you can hear the click of that kick at the start. Rounded mine off, became a little bit more pendulum-y. And speaking of clicky, I also turned down the high end frequencies as well. Kind of a little bit muted, just enough to pop through the mix. And onto the snare. Fundamental oosh kind of sound is actually pretty long, so I chose a snare that's quite fundamental heavy. Rounded off that low end and gave it a little bit of smack in the high end there. And what would you know, classic Pendulum kick snare. And for the rest of the drums, it's just a matter of layering up cymbals and whatnot, because there's a lot going on with the drums. It's not just, like, there's a magnitude of hi-hats and rides and other percussion in that. So, of course, we want something on every beat. A little bit emphasized. And of course, another hi-hat just to doing the random 8th sounds. And of course, with all my drums, feed them into a saturator. A little bit of parallel compression as well. I notice it's getting absolutely slammed. Because it was a little bit too punchy. Weirdly, the drums were too punchy. I just need to glue them all together. Anyway, that is the drums. So what else do we need? Bit of effects. A little bit of a crash at the start. Risers just to fill in the ambiance in the background. I just went with a down sweep, simple as. Literally, this is it. Alright, moving on. And instruments. This occupies like a very specific part of the mid-range. And the super wide as well. Super necessary if you hear the drop without the guitar. Actually still goes pretty hard, but it's just missing something little in the middle there. It's actually very mono just without this. So I didn't have guitars on standby to record, so I just made my own. 8 notes. Fed it through a couple of amps on Guitar Rig. Classic Guitar Rig gives it that chug sound. What the hell is that? Anyway, distortion. And a detuned saw wave lastly, giving a lot of width. You know what, that sounds a little bit too mono compared to the other guitars, so I'm going to push this out even more, make it wider. Hopefully that'll improve my drop. Guitars occupying a very specific range as well, nothing below 206 and nothing above 5K. This is the case with the guitars as well, nothing kind of below this area, nothing above this area. Below this is kick, snare, and sub. Above this is lead. We just wanted it to accompany everything else. And here we go, wide layer, grit, eighths. And of course we come to the bass. There's two bass elements in these stems, sub. And bass. You notice the bass barely doing anything below 100 Hz. It's almost like a reinforcement. So I kind of did a similar thing. And one more thing to take away with the sub as well, it's not just doing eighths, it's not doing da 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 da, it's doing something. Yeah, not your typical eighths kind of da 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 D and B stuff. And the sub is really punchy as well. So I did a similar thing using Serum, pitch envelope LFO 1 to master tune. Coarse and just a little bit overdrive to give some more harmonics. And bass as well, did something kind of similar. Went a little bit overboard with the bass, but did a lot more bass compared to the original Granite stems, but it's just there for reinforcement. You barely hear it in the mix. So that is the sub and the bass together. Notice we haven't used sidechain yet. The kick and snare sit so far above the sub bass that they don't clash, and there's no like real bass layer that's occupying like these frequencies around here that the kick and snare do. So no sidechain's necessary. Everything has its own specific frequency band in the mix. Starting from lowest, sub, then it would go kick, then it would go snare, then it would go this bass and guitars, and then it would go lead, and then yeah, it just everything has its own purpose and space in the mix. And that is some Rob Swire clean mix down shit, so that kick and snare can punch through the mix extra hard, because nothing else is around those frequencies, so they can just go full throttle. They're the only things there. They have all the space you need. Anyway, last thing, lead. And for this one, I used two of my favorite presets from my pack, Viscous, Best and the Bestest. They're great little leads to just chuck on everything, very Pendulum-like. Instrument rack, two got them playing exactly the same time, a little bit of EQ as well. So if you break down the different sections, drums typically sit higher in the mix. They don't need sidechain or anything because they've got like the kick, snare, 100 to 250 Hertz frequencies. That's their jam, nobody else is interfering with that, so they can punch through. Not super transient heavy as well. Snare fundamental is thick. Guitar layer, a purely reinforcement to just tie the lead and the sub bass together and provide that middle ground right there. Typically eighths as well. Sub bass, a little bit of a pitch envelope. Don't just do straight up eighths, just da 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 if you want to get that pendulum sound. Come up with a new rhythm, which would sound sick. Lead, typically saw waves with a bit of distortion, a little bit of multi-band compression, TT sometimes. Try come up with a sick riff. Once you get like the saw wave sound, you're kind of on your way anyway. And bass as well, reinforce the sub bass. Doesn't occupy that many bass frequencies, just to kind of a growl to add character to the drop. Oh, and chuck a down sweep on the start. And that is my pendulum breakdown. Hopefully you learned a thing or two, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!